Hey beauties, I'm Emily and welcome to Sequential Body. Let's talk about hip opening today and how elusive it is in class. So in the yoga lens, we look at hip opening as one thing, and that is the category of externally rotated poses. Now, external rotation to the hip is super necessary. We all need it, but the hip moves in multiple directions, not just external rotation. So we've got hip flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal and external rotation. That means that we've got over 20 muscles to the hip. And in order to get true hip opening, we need to focus and dial in onto many of those muscles. Now, the muscles lay on top of the hip joint itself. So because it's a ball and socket joint and it's got a capsule that's lubricated, what we're looking to do is lubricate that hip as we stretch into the depth of those muscles that wrap around it. So for today, I'm going to give you a couple of my exercises that I like to get creative with in class in order to balance the hip. And the last thing I want to say is that hip opening and hip stretching are not the same thing. We're not looking to always intensify a stretch, which is why I think that pigeon can be so elusive in talking about hip opening, because that intense stretch through the glute becomes what people associate with as hip opening itself. But in order to truly open the hip, you need to balance the hip from the joint. So let's begin. Come onto hands and knees in a quadruped position for me. Lengthen your tailbone back. And from here, inhale into a cow, just letting the belly drop down, and then exhale into a cat. And then we're going to step the right foot forward and come into a low lunge. You can use blocks for this, but what I want to specify is that we're not just hanging out in the pelvis, getting a stretch on that left hip flexor. What I want you to do is pull that right hip back. Take your tailbone down in a bit of a posterior tilt so your frontal hip bones are up. Take the arms to the sky, cinch the ribs in, and then push into the right foot to go for a stretch through the top of that left hip flexor. Now, this could be plenty for class, having them hold this alignment instead of dumping into the pelvis and over-exaggerating the stretch. Holding this helps them to build the capacity to really balance the hip from right to left. From there, you could also dynamically sweep the arms back to start to get into the hamstrings and to get into the fascia line of the IT band outside the thigh. So this is a fun, creative one I like to play with in class so that people can learn how to balance through the pelvis as well as stretch through the psoas on that opposite hip. Now, another one that I really love for hip opening is just these little rocks that get into the inner thigh. So extending the right leg back, tucking the toes so you can stretch into the calf, the Achilles tendon. Keeping the hands down or on the blocks, step the foot nice and wide. Pause with me, drop into the hips. Do a couple little rocks up and down so you're stretching into that inner thigh. And then stretch the leg out and rock forward and back as well. Now, again, doesn't mean that it's the most intense thing you're working on in class, but that's not the point of hip opening itself. So pulling away from this idea that the hip opening is about an intense stretch somewhere in the body and more about finding this ability to move the leg freely in the joint space. So these little rocks are just helping to lubricate things up. I like taking about 3-4 of these. And then you can also get really nice and creative and stay and push the leg away, which I'm going to show you in another little transition I like to do. So that's another creative way to start to open through the hips, and it's getting into something different, the adductors, as opposed to the psoas that we just looked at. Now let's add on to that. From your downward facing dog, step your right foot forward for me. Take your right arm up. So I'm in a nice high lunge. From here, we're going to spin to the pinky edge of both the right and the left foot and reach the arm back to get that external rotation to the hip and to stretch into the structure of the IT band outside the leg. Top arm will come up, spin it around, and find a skandasana on that right side, flipping the left toes to the sky. So I get this nice external rotation to the legs here, but I'm also stretching through the inner upper thighs as well as the outer leg line. Turn it back forward for me and move this into a nice little dynamic sequence that will help you to mindfully start to open through the hips. And what this does is it sets the practitioner up to be able to pivot really nicely through the lower body, feeling out all the nuances to the pelvis itself. As you come forward, you can stay into that high lunge. Hand could be down, top arm goes up, find that twist, and then straighten that right leg and let your arm go back. Bend the knee, sweep the arm forward, find the twist, sweep the arm back, open it. So a great way to now target through that outer leg, right by the greater trochanter itself. So the outer hip, where we get lots of muscles attaching to it, those glute muscles and those external rotators. And then do that one more time, just feeling it out. This can get super creative. You can make this the whole thing we were just working on. So I can turn it back, pivot in, find that skandasana, flip it back around, take the arm up to the sky, sweep it back, bend the knee, skandasana. So I like to do things that allow you to find transitions that are useful to the practice. And then as you take it into that second side, you can do the same thing by going to the opposite leg without having to fuss around with vinyasas or anything like that. So this little flow here, again, one of my favorites for creatively opening the hips and allowing you to stretch into more muscles than you would in just a pigeon. Now, you're gonna tell me, but they love pigeon. Sure, take them into their pigeon to stretch the hips, but instead of dumping the weight over the legs, keep it active. Keep that back knee on the ground, toes tucked, and then force them to lift up through the hips and hold it so they're balancing out the pelvis muscles themselves. From here, you can play with leans over the leg, and this is a great one for strengthening the hip. I love this for getting into the hip flexors as well. And you can also play with lifting up and down a little bit more. And using the blocks for this is so great. So hands can come down and you can lift up and lower nice and slow. Lift up and lower nice and slow. And this is just, again, a feel-good way to strengthen and balance the hips, but it gives your practitioner something different to feel into than just laying in a passive pigeon. So when we're thinking about creatively getting into the hips and sequencing things that open the hips, we have to remember there's over 20 muscles to this area of the body. And what that means is that just doing externally rotated poses is limiting. It won't target much, and it's going to keep the hips restricted over time. What we want to do is diversify our portfolio of postures in class in order to balance the hip and restore its range of motion.